Oh, wasn't in full screen after all. There we go. Okay. So this is my University of South Carolina Honors College thesis defense. The official title is Examining the Effect of a Vegan Diet on Osteoarthritis Pain, Symptom, and Functionality Levels. So a bit of background here. I would say that a commonality among all of the members of the New Soul team is that we believe that making a change to a person's diet is a viable healthcare intervention and it can produce beneficial health outcomes. Previous research does indicate that plant-based diets positively influence health. A little bit more on previous research. So the adoption of a plant-based diet has been shown to do a few things. There's improvement in physical functioning and mental health, a reduction in lipids and blood pressure, decreases in inflammatory markers, all found in different studies of varying populations and locations, which is good. Specifically, the relationship between a vegan diet and joint pain is also quite interesting. There's been observed changes in congenital arthritis, that's rheumatoid arthritis, and arthritis due to physical wear, which is osteoarthritis. There's been reduction in pain symptom for those and increases in functionality. And there's also been an observation, an association between weight loss and a reduction in joint pain. So now we're going to move into a little bit of our limitations and kind of formulating the need for where we need some exploration. So there's definitely a sound scientific knowledge basis that says plant-based diets are good for a million different health reasons. But current research has excluded some key demographics in some specific areas. So getting participants to change their diet and stick with it in the first place is difficult. So previous studies have largely been observational because you need voluntary plant eaters. And so that automatically cancels out anybody that would need social support, informational support, dietary support in their effort to change to a plant-based diet. In addition to that, majority of the populations that have been tested for the effects of a plant-based diet have been largely white. So an example down there, a previous study had 100% white people in their control group and 88.9% in their experimental group, and that was a cohort size of around 50. Previous studies have also largely only been conducted in closed clinical or experimental environments, so there hasn't been a ton of practical application of getting a plant-based diet in some sort of community intervention. And that brings us to the New Soul study. There's just a bit of background here. So we know that African Americans are a population that have remained underserved when it comes to plant-based diet interventions. Southern African Americans in particular are at higher risk because of soul food, and I'll get into that in a second. Southern African American communities are more likely to lack resources or social networks for individuals to make dietary changes. But previous research has also observed the, like a beneficial implementation of a community intervention. So for example, there was a 2015 study on African Americans with type 2 diabetes, and a community intervention successfully produced a statistically significant reduction in glycemic levels. So more about the background of New Soul study. African Americans and nutrition, they've had a bit of a hard time. Soul food originated during the time of slavery, and basically it originated because of low quality foods and the need to make it palatable. So slaves would add a ton of fat and sodium to their diets just to make food go down. As slavery went away, soul food and those high sodium and high fat content foods stuck around. And so we need an intervention that is not going to neglect the cultural significance of soul food, but also improve the nutritional content of African American diets. You guys all know a ton about the New Soul study already. 9-month community-based intervention. We're partnered with Rare Variety. And here's the big one, honestly, the goals of the New Soul study. And that's to examine the impact of a vegan diet on short-term weight loss, that's at 3 months, and weight loss maintenance, that's at 9 months. And above all that, the New Soul team is also just looking to analyze how well can we implement this program into the community. It's kind of a trial and error thing. So for my senior thesis, I've joined the New Soul team. Last April I did, to examine the effect of the diet on osteoarthritis. We hypothesized that participation in a 12-week community-based nutrition, plant-based intervention will be associated with a significant improvement in osteoarthritis health status. In addition to that, we hypothesized that weight loss will be significantly associated with an improvement in osteoarthritis health status. So now we're getting into the New Soul study, putting a community intervention in action. And this was probably the most effortful part of getting this all started. Participants were recruited via word of mouth, radio advertisement, social media advertisement, and advertisements placed in our community business partner, Rare Variety Cafe. There was also a pretty extensive screening and education process for participants. They all completed baseline weight examinations as well as a lengthy baseline survey. That survey is what contained my measure, which I'll touch on in a little bit. After all of that was completed, participants attended their first orientation class. They got to meet our community leader, Bonita Clemens, get more information about what participation in the study would actually entail. And once they had all the information presented to them, they had an opportunity to leave if they felt that they could not do the study. Getting into New Soul classes here, you would think that you would primarily just be covering, okay, how do we make soul food vegan, right? And of course, those were topics. So we had recipes of soul food favorites turned vegan. We also had some favorite recipes from members of the New Soul team, but there were also some unique topics covered that would supplement and aid people in adhering to the diet and making the transition. So for example, there were perceptions of vegan diets in media, coping strategies with food relationships, and an interesting one to me was gendered perceptions of veganism. You'll see this later in the results, but 84% of the cohort that we examined were female. And I was ignorant of the fact that there is a gendered stereotype about switching to a vegan diet, and it may have prohibited or limited the sign up of males to join the study. And so that's certainly something that we can discuss later. The New Soul classes were a really, really great environment for fostering a community between members and between instructors. The majority of class time was spent in open discussion, and input could be received or given from participants and instructors at any time. And so that created a really good environment for a two-way collaboration and flow of information and ideas. And that helped things go a lot more smoothly when roadblocks or road bumps did pop up. And that communal support was something that I believe really assisted people in adhering to the diet. This is our measure. It is the Knee Osteoarthritis Outcome Score, and it has 5 separate domains: pain, symptoms, activities of daily living, sport and recreation, and quality of life. And each domain is scored out of 100, so it's pretty easy to interpret. All of the KOOS, that's what we'll call it, KOOS scales, were included in the baseline surveys and as well as the 3-month surveys. And so that gave us a pre and post measure. The KOOS was used to analyze, obviously, changes in those 5 scores over the 3 months, but we also did a comparison between changes in KOOS scores and the weight loss that the participants experienced over the course of the 3 months. Here's some procedural data things. first summarize all the participant demographics. Those were age, sex, weight, and education level. Second, we conducted paired t-tests to assess differences in participants' weight and each of the 5 domains of the KOOS scale. And third, to assess the relationship between weight loss and improvements in the 5 KOOS domain scores, 5 multiple regression models were created, one for each domain of the KOOS scale, and our significance level was 0.05. Our variables, we have a dependent variable of a 3-month score in the KOOS domain, changes in those. The independent variable was a change in weight loss from baseline to follow-up, and our controls were age, sex, education, and corresponding baseline KOOS domain score. Here's our first table. This summarizes participant demographics. You can see that they were around 48.7 years old, weighing at around 106.1 kilograms on average. Participants were mostly female. Again, that was 84%. And many of the participants were highly educated, college or above. This is table 2, summary of mean 3-month weight loss. So this is just weight loss. We can see that on average, it went down about 2 kilograms. Mean overall weight loss was negative 1.9 plus or minus 3.1 kilograms. You won't see any more about this on this presentation, but we did not find a statistically significant relationship between weight loss and any of the changes in the 5 domain scores of the KOOS. Here's a summary of the changes in the 5 domains of the KOOS scale. Probably the one column to pay attention to the most, if you're just looking to get a general idea of what the results were, is the mean score difference. So you can see that there was a decrease in each of the 5 domains of the KOOS scale. If you skip 2 more columns over, you'll see that none of these decreases in mean scores was actually statistically significant. So none of our results were statistically significant. Here's a graphic representation of the decrease in the 5 domains of the KOOS scale. You can see it went down. So now we'll move into our discussion. We knew this pretty early on, but our study it suffered a lot from a lack of statistical power, but that doesn't mean that the changes that we observed in the KOOS domain scores weren't meaningful, because all 5 domains still decreased. So John and I would classify this as a clinically significant change. And again, we think it was just a low sample size that made the study underpowered. So in the future, we could make some adjustments to the study format and hopefully get statistically significant results, which we'll talk about now. So again, I'll repeat, not statistically significant, but clinically significant. And the reason for that, I think, is that the New Soul study really wasn't designed to examine the effect of a vegan diet on osteoarthritis. If you remember previously in the presentation, the primary goal is to assess weight loss and weight loss maintenance. And so you might say, Evan, why don't we just make the cohort larger? If that was the problem all along, we just need more people. And that's when some of the challenges of a community intervention kind of rear their head. So if we wanted to make the cohort larger, we would need a lot more funds, manpower, and time that probably just weren't available at this stage in testing out the New Soul community intervention format. But it's all not negative. There certainly are some positives, because if you remember earlier, the small class size was super crucial to being the catalyst for these people to adhere to the diet better. Weight loss is just a numbers game. You can go up in your weight, you can keep the same weight, or you can go down in weight. But osteoarthritis has a lot of different variables involved. And so a cohort of 20 people that are all changing their diet to add just a ton more vegetables and fruits along with class formats that are encouraging them to exercise and practice other good health habits, it's a very likely outcome that all of the participants would experience some weight loss if they did everything correctly and didn't cheat, you know? But when it comes to osteoarthritis, there's so many different factors. For example, participants could have had previous sports or orthopedic injuries. They could have any number of different muscle health statuses. That could be muscle disease, problems with muscle tone or strength. There's also prior movement or sport history to take into account, prior activity levels to take into account, and body dimensions. And so for future research, I think that the primary thing that we would need is just a larger participant pool to increase the statistical power of our results. And so just to wrap up, I'd like to thank Dr. Bree and John for being my thesis director and my second reader. They helped me immensely, but also the rest of the New Soul team. All of you influenced me in your own special way. I took ideas from all of you at some point and incorporated it into my own project. And from there, I think that we can move into questions and discussions.
Fabulous. Very nice. Questions?
I have a question for you, Evan.
Okay.
So thinking about how you're talking about how it's not statistically significant, but it could be clinically significant, did a large portion of your sample already have osteoarthritis? And if yes or if no, or like, were there baseline scores in a range that, you know, was problematic? So like, how much do these reductions really mean if they are clinically significant?
Right. That's definitely something that we overlooked. I wasn't sure of each participant's diagnosed osteoarthritis status. So if they had been diagnosed previously with osteoarthritis, I wasn't aware of that. All we were looking at was decreases between baseline and 3 months. So that would certainly be something to ask in the future.
Did we look at, I mean, does the KOOS provide like a, this is too high scale for like pain or something that would indicate someone maybe had issues? Because that could certainly be something we look at, you know, like a percentage of people that scored in a way that would indicate, you know, issues with osteoarthritis.
I think that's definitely a next step. I focus so much on just the change between baseline and 3 months. I honestly kind of overlooked just the interpretation of a raw score. I think that the subjective nature of the test might play a part in variations between scores. Like for example, all of the different assessments, subjective assessments that we use in a physical therapy clinic, scores can range a lot for different people because, you know, Miss Betty's pain, oh, it's a 10, Evan, but in reality, you know, it's a 2. So that may be a component, but there's certainly some merit in knowing a general range of, okay, on average, people with osteoarthritis score in this range for this domain.
Yeah, we probably should have added a question now that I'm thinking about it, asking if people had ever been diagnosed with any sort of arthritis, you know, that would have been probably good to include.
Evan, nicely done. Congratulations. Nice job. My question for you is similar to the question that I asked Reagan. So kind of switching from now that you have the research side of information, thinking more of a programmatic side. You're very familiar with the program. I know you watched a lot of the classes. What would you change, if anything, about the classes to teach more about osteoarthritis symptoms or any of the 5 domains specifically, and how those relate to plant-based diets, and you know how else that we can promote the importance of eating a plant-based diet?
The first thing that I would do, we already touched on, ask about previous diagnosis. I would want to make the study participants more aware of the benefits that the diet could potentially have on their arthritis. It was cool when I was watching classes, people started to figure out once they were on the diet for a good bit of time that, okay, I changed this one aspect of my health, nutrition, but I'm also doing more physical activity now. I'm also sleeping better now. It was kind of like this realization that people have this checklist in front of them of all these health habits, and you go through the day and you check them off, and it's good practice to do that. And whether they realized it or not, they were doing that, and they were encouraging each other to do that, practice healthy habits. I think that there would just need to be more visibility of what the potential benefits of the diet are on participants' physical functioning, and maybe more cues or more urging to participants to say, hey, why don't you go try this out? Like go on a walk and see if your knee hurts as much as it did previously, or really think about it. Like maybe you did go on a walk earlier and I don't know, my knee is hurt forever. I don't even think about it anymore. But think about the things that maybe you couldn't do previously and now, oh, okay, that came to me way easier than before. So just making participants more cognizant of this specific potential benefit of the diet.
Other questions? I had a question about, and I can't remember, we may have discussed it already, but it makes sense that, pain went down. That's a good thing, but quality of life score went down too. So is that scored in a way that means it's good or bad?
That means it's good.
Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's basically you want
that.
decreases in scores indicate improvements in those measures.
Yep.
I thought so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, regardless of what domain it was, a decrease indicates an improvement, whatever relative to whatever that domain is, and an increase would indicate the opposite way.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Evan, I have a question. This was great. You did a great job. And thought you did a really good job of tying some of the issues around sort of how we do these secondary studies and the limitations around, we can't kind of power on everything. I had a question. I'm not a clinician, and you brought up this idea of like the subjective people's pain, the subjectivity of pain scores. Do you have any suggestions of like how you could more accurately assess people's pain, or what's out there, other things to assess pain besides those kind of subjective 1 to 10?
I mean, I'm not sure if there's some sort of procedure that you can do that analyzes like nervous system activity in response to a stimulus or anything like that. But honestly, pain is subjective. It's like only you feel your own pain, and you can describe it to other people, and that's often what's good for diagnosing a problem. But it is subjective. The good thing about using a subjective measure with the same person is that you have a good inter-rater reliability between assessment points. So again, pain is your own. But another example, like if you were to do manual muscle testing, like testing somebody else's strength, if you were in a clinic, if I did that and I scored somebody a 5 and you did that, you could score somebody a 3 or a 4. So basically, what I think is that the most important component is just keeping the same rater. So if it's an external rater, I'm rating you, I need to do it every time, or you need to fill out the survey every time. Aside from that, pain really is kind of a idiosyncrasy, if you think about it.
Great, thanks.
So I just had, you probably won't know the answer to this, but just, we talk about, we don't have power, right, for this, but wanted to emphasize, this was just done on the first cohort. So you will be able to double your sample size if we add, and we did that because of time, because the second cohort's, being tested now. And so, but we
Right.
should have a lot of data to add. So do you have hope that maybe some of these will be statistically significant with adding what, John, maybe 40 more people between the recorded and the,
Potentially, it'll probably be a little bit under 40, but we
yeah,
could potentially add up to 40 more. And I will say, Evan, yesterday at the assessment, whenever you had to slip out for a minute, one of the participants was asking, because like I reminded them about their survey that they had to complete, and they're like, "Yeah, I did it." And like, why were there all these questions about like my knee and everything? And she wasn't like upset about it. Because she then went on to say like, "Are you guys thinking about like trying to continue to offer this program and show that it has other benefits besides just weight loss?" And so you have the curiosity of the participants.
oh, that's cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dr. Breed. Oh, yes. I mean, I definitely have hope that it would increase the statistical power. But I think that we would just have to see how it shakes out. I'm totally unfamiliar with what size participant pool that you would be looking for to actually receive a statistically significant result for an examination of arthritis like this. But yeah, I definitely have hope that at least something will be significant. Kind of like Reagan's, like, I'm not expecting every single domain to be significant,
Yeah.
but maybe pain. That's the big one. Like maybe
Yeah.
pain.
Yep. And maybe you'll see a significant correlation between the KOOS and the weight loss scores too, which we weren't able to see on this round. Yeah. And one of the things, if we do ever want to publish this, is we probably will have to do some sort of power calculation just to give sort of we estimated we'd need this many people to, and for that, we would just look at prior studies to see sort of what expected changes are from a diet intervention or some sort of intervention on that KOOS thing. So,
Right.
yes. Other questions for Evan?
Evan, can you unshare your screen just so we can see everybody? There we go.